Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Mirror of Intimacy webinar. I'm Dr. Alexandra Katehakis, and today is Monday, March 6th. It's a beautiful Monday here in Los Angeles, and our topic today is fertility. And I just want to point out to those of you who are daily Mirror of Intimacy readers, you've probably noticed that our topics are no longer lining up with the dates in which I give the webinar, and that's because so many of these topics have been covered previously. And of course, you can find those topics on our YouTube channel in case you haven't heard them. But today we are going to be talking about fertility. And a few things I'd like to say before we start. I want to remind you to type your questions into the Q&A box, and I'll answer them as we go along. And also to leave your book reviews or comments on Amazon for Mirror of Intimacy, because we love getting them and hearing from you. Let us know what you love about the book, maybe how you're using the book, if you're gifting the book. All of that is really fun to know. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. That way you'll never miss a post. You can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Alex Katehakis or at Center for Healthy Sex. And like I said, previous webinars on topics that aren't aligning with the dates can be found on our YouTube channel at Center for Healthy Sex. So this is a topic that I think is a really great topic for this time of year. It's a topic that people might not find very sexy, but our topic today is fertility. And the quote is from Rebecca Wells, who writes, "She wanted to hand over, to yield, to let herself float down the uncharted, beautiful, fertile, musky swamp of life, where creativity and eroticism and deep intelligence dwell." And I think that's incredibly poetic. And as you know, I like to read these quotes twice because there's a lot in them. So she writes, she wanted to hand over, to yield, to let herself float down the uncharted, beautiful, fertile, musky swamp of life, where creativity and eroticism and deep intelligence dwell. And what I hear in that quotation is a surrender, a letting go, of going with the flow, of seeing what she's saying the fertile, musky swamp, I would say the fecund swamp of life, brings to us. It can be creativity, and where creativity and eroticism come together, deep intelligence, so many surprises that life brings us. That's where we will find the fertility in our lives. We'll find the richness of our lives when we're willing to jump into it and see what life brings us. There's a beautiful term in Alcoholics Anonymous where they talk about life on life's terms. And I believe that is what our author Rebecca Wells is pointing to today, that we are in the flow. We don't know what's going to happen. She uses the word swamp and creativity in juxtaposition because life is both and. So keep that in mind as we have this conversation today. And I want to remind you, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box. Also, if you have a need to talk to an intake counselor, we're available to talk to you now, 310-843-9902. So if anything comes up for you, you want to talk to somebody, or if you need a resource in your town, we're happy to give that to you. Sometimes within a relationship, issues of fertility can cause fissure in intimacy. It can cause a lot of tension, a lot of aggravation. It can be devastating when a couple becomes fixated on having a baby, but they can't achieve that goal. And I've seen this time and time again where relationships really get frayed because there's so much stress and tension about wanting a baby, not being able to conceive a baby, and the issues that it brings up for both parties, the mechanistic pressure of having to have sex at a certain time when the female's ovulating, certainly the money that can be spent on IVF. And there's a real pushing against what's going on instead of an accepting of what is. And accepting what is doesn't mean that you give up on your circumstances, but the incredible efforting and tension becomes a vicious cycle, actually. For many, it makes it even less easy for them to conceive, or I should say, it makes it more difficult for them to conceive. I once had a friend many, many years ago who was really fighting to get pregnant. She was 38 years old. And one day she realized that she was stressing herself so completely that there was no way she would get pregnant. So she stopped all of the medical intervention and she started going to a place of worship that was meaningful to her every week. And slowly but surely, as her tension started to drop, eventually she got pregnant naturally. Now, that may not be the case for everybody, but there is something instructive in that, not just about pregnancy or conception, but in life, that what we want may not come in our time. It will come, and it will come in a form that we may not recognize. But if we just drop it and let it go, then we're always surprised to see what emerges from that. Communication and joy in these circumstances can get smothered both inside and outside of the bedroom. It can make sex become joyless. As I said, more of a function that has to be performed during ovulation for conception. The desire to become a parent is a deep human need in many people. And some of us experience it at some point or another. Whether we go through with it or not is a different matter. But it still touches our longing for immortality, our desire to pass on our legacy to another generation, our desire to experience ourselves as a parent, as a mentor, as a caregiver. It pulls on many, many, I think, biological and evolutionarily driven states inside of ourselves. So it's nothing to be taken lightly. So the traditional definition of fertility applies to usually a woman's ability to bear children. We now know men can have fertility problems also. It can also be applied to the concept of fertility that expands beyond gender, age, or circumstance. And that's the conversation I think most useful to us today, especially as we are facing spring this month, which is a time of great fertility, great newness, emerging from the depth of winter, from the darkness, from the rains as it's been here, the wind, the snow, the tornadoes in other places. Fertility can express the inner bloom of creativity. It can express our imagination, all of which resides inside of us and does not depend on a lover. And I can't stress this enough, that our own fertile ground, our own internal process of loving and being loved, our experience of producing whatever that production is, whether it's a baby or a business or a book or a painting or music or any other body of work, requires a fertile ground. And you hear writers talk about writer's block. And often that block is just part of the creative process. Anxiety can be part of a creative process. Going into the woodshed, not knowing if anything's going to show up or not, is part of that process. And when we embrace the fallowness, the appearance that nothing is going on as part of that which is going on, then we start to have a different experience of our own fertility, of our own inner bloom of creativity. And we make a space for something to emerge out of that nothingness. And that, of course, can be easier said than done because it really requires patience. It requires a lack of self-judgment and being punitive. It requires self-compassion also, and saying, you know what, nothing's happening right now. And I don't have to make anything happen because I know something will show up in due time. If you keep keeping your attention on the intention of your fertility, of your inner bloom, whether it is, as I said, whatever your creative endeavor is, writing, singing, acting, cooking, having a baby, whatever it is, it will come. As they say, good things come to those who wait. The saying is not good things come to those who push on things. Embracing our own fertility means cultivating our feminine energies, And when we cultivate our feminine energies, we're talking about receptivity, of absorbing experience, of transmuting it into new forms. So the feminine is receptive, it has broad attention, it's open, it's not looking for patterns or trying to figure something out in a concrete way. And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, or how you identify in terms of your gender. Experiencing masculine and feminine energies are really important to being more integrated, whatever your gender identity is. So pay attention to your own feminine energy, and do you cultivate that? Do you make a space for this openness, for this receptivity, for absorption, for seeing things in a new way, not collapsing down into what you already know, which is definitely much more closed. And our sexuality is one of our greatest fertile powers, obviously. We can harness it to express a rainbow of facets beyond the literal manifestation of reproduction. So think about all the ways that you use your fertile powers and how you harness those powers to express all the various modes of fertility that you have inside of you. For those who have been engaged in any kind of addiction, whether it's sex, love, relationship, drugs, alcohol, food, shopping, you name it, those things block our sexuality in a way. So that we're not open to harnessing that power. We're in fact just discharging that energy all the time in a way that can be quite negative and quite unproductive at times. So ask yourself, where do I use my sexual energy on any given day? Is it leaking out? Am I constantly flirting? Am I constantly looking for sex, love, or something else to make me feel good? Or am I taking that energy and using it as a zest for life, as a joie de vivre, as a purpose? And even if it comes in simple forms like gratitude, like, wow, I'm just so grateful today, because it's such a beautiful day and I'm waking up and I feel good. And if I'm really lucky, I'm healthy. But if I'm not that healthy, maybe today's a little bit better than yesterday. So how do you embrace these fertile powers? How do you put them to use on a daily basis? And we can be fertilized by ideas that we share with coworkers or performance partners. We can become impregnated with images, sounds, smells, and feelings. So think about the language that's being used here. These are typically languages of sex and baby making that we're applying to life, because life is alive. The planet is incredibly alive. It's constantly percolating at all times. And so can we become impregnated with the images we see all day long? The sounds we hear, the smells, the feelings we have, and can we transmute those into something that's uniquely ours? We can become spiritually fruitful through meditation and quiet and energy engendering solitude. So while we can take all of this data in through our central nervous system, the sensuality of life that I'm talking about, we can also conversely become very fruitful spiritually and very productive by getting quiet, by sitting in meditation, by seeing what emerges from the inside out. So this is the way our two different nervous systems work. Our central nervous system is taking data in from the outside through our five senses in a very sensual way, through taste and touch and smell and sight and hearing. And we're being informed constantly from the outside. And so that is the external coming into the internal. We transmute that and we give it back in the way that we perform our daily tasks and work and gifts. But likewise, if we sit quietly, if we really sit quietly in meditation and any other kind of energy engendering solitude, then we see what comes up, what emerges from the bottom, from the body up out of us. And together, this external and internal together create a high level of integration and a high level of fertility for creativity. So I have something in the chat box here. Someone writes, when we differentiate feminine and masculine energy, are we implying that females have more natural with feminine energy and males with masculine energy? Or are these just nomenclature to identify two different kinds of energy that can reside in any gender equally? Yes, the answer to your last question is yes. And that's what I was trying to communicate verbally, that there are plenty of females that have a lot of masculine energy and they can deny or disconnect from the feminine, and plenty of males who have a lot of feminine energy, but they disconnect from it or deny it. And I'm suggesting when we invite in the opposite, these are just energies. We see them on the earth. The planet has masculine and feminine energies. In fact, eons ago, the Greeks and the Romans and other cultures formulated mythological gods to embody those energies. So, for example, Apollo is a masculine god, and he is the god of the sun. So the sun is thought to have a masculine energy. It's intense, it can be harsh, it's powerful. Whereas the goddess of the moon was a female goddess, and the moon we associate with interior, with the night. That was Diana in the Roman cosmology, or Artemis with the Greeks. And so she came out in the evening time when it was quiet and, again, interior. And so these are simply archetypal energies that we embody and that we see all around us every day. With spring coming, we're going to see the fertility of the earth. We're going to see the feminine manifestations in flowers, in green grass, from all of the rain that came also. But that feminine energy cannot exist without the sun, without the masculine, giving it the source of energy it needs in order to birth and to come into fruition. So think of the earth and you will see the masculine and feminine everywhere, all day, every day. And likewise, we embody these energies and they're available to us. And sometimes we're weighted too far in one direction. We have cut off the masculine or the feminine in us, regardless of how we identify, regardless of our gender. And so we want to look to be more integrated, more androgynous, if you will, because then we have access to both of these polarities, which makes us able to experience things in different ways. And I would say, in some ways, be more creative. So fertility applies to every kind of birth imaginable, from the blossoming of the first flowers this spring to the conception of a new business. It doesn't discriminate in any way. And think about what you've planted thus far this year. Think about what you're endeavoring to bring to fruition. Think about what's in your immediate world that you're putting your attention on, that you want to blossom and to bloom. It's all around us, and it's around us, of course, in nature is the most obvious place to see it, but it's in the realm of all of our human affairs. And I think I'm seeing this quite a bit now in a different way, where the fruits of my labors of the last 10, 20 years are coming to fruition in new and different ways right now. And it's very gratifying. There's an ease to it. And I'm reminded of how impatient I once was about why things weren't happening now. I was even thinking recently about a time when I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and every night I would sit on my bedroom floor and write affirmations and speak affirmations. I was trying to get something going in my life. And I knew that something bigger was waiting for me. I just couldn't reach my potential at that time. I didn't have a direction. I didn't know what to do. So the best I could do would be to state affirmations repeatedly and religiously. And I'm sure I started to do other things also, but that image really struck me this weekend as I was doing something that felt professionally gratifying. And I was reminded of just how long it took for things to come to fruition. A baby takes 9 months to gestate, but a business can take, they say 10 years for something to get off the ground. So it's important not to give up, to lose hope, to get impatient with yourself, to recognize that you can't get impatient when you plant a garden. If you plant the seed, you can't stand there on the edge of the garden and start digging up the seed to see why it's not growing yet, because you'll just kill it, right? You really have to patiently wait and water it, make sure it gets enough sun and nutrients, and take your hands off it and trust that something will emerge, something will come to fruition. So ask yourself right now, what is it that's going on in your life? What are the things that you've set into motion? What are the things you believe in the most about yourself that really lights you up, that you want to do? And are you being impatient, or are you making a big space for things to surprise you, for things to inform you as you wait and see what direction things come in? And this, of course, can be true for love relationships also, that, people get into relationships and often they're very quick to have the conversation of where's this going, as opposed to seeing how it unfolds. And if it's unfolding in a way where there is progress being made, where the relationship is deepening emotionally, then there's usually no need to ask that question. That question gets asked when somebody feels incredibly anxious, or when one party is watching the other person not fall into step with them. Maybe they're slow to catch up. And so the conversation there would be more about, how are we doing? Or how are you feeling in this relationship? What do you like about it? What scares you? Do you want to continue? Which is a scary question to ask, right? But that's a better question than what are we doing or where's this going? Because that always feels like pressure or an accusation to the party who's not asking that question. Fertility can never elude us if we're open. And that's what I think I'm saying. If you're open, if you're actively engaged in the beauty and in the eroticism of your everyday life, it won't elude you. You will see it every single day in little ways. For those of you that are fortunate enough to have seasons, you can watch the fertility of the planet coming and going. In California, we actually do have seasons this year. So we will start to see it warm up, I'm pretty sure. And already we're seeing the manifestation of all the rain around us, the green hills, the wildflowers that are poking up. And just like that, you can see it in your everyday life. If you look back and look at what you've accomplished today that you hadn't even just a year ago, take stock of what you did last year. This is why I think it's important constantly to look at what your wins have been, especially over the past year. And even since the first of the year, what have been your wins? Maybe you've gotten to the gym more often than you ever thought you could. Maybe you're eating a little bit better. These don't have to be giant moments, but they add up. Maybe you took some risk in business or in your job, and things are paying off for you in a way that you didn't think they would. So take stock of what's happening in your life right now and see if you can see the fertility in it today. There's no need to wait. So our healthy sex acts today ask, how do you embrace your innate fertility and that of others? How do you embrace that? How do you trust that you are a fertile ground for all sorts of possibilities and creativity, what I would call your potential? It's the adage of, an oak tree is contained within an acorn. And so you are your own acorn, and in that is an oak tree. And you have to know that, and you have to believe it. And then you have to take action to start to create the conditions for that acorn to start to crack open for the tree to come forward. So today, give voice to the real process of your own fertility, whether it's the impregnation of your imagination to the germination of your ideas. But start to, maybe even after this webinar, write down what are the things that you're longing for, the things that you really, really want in your life, the things that you're going to put your attention to. And just the act of writing them down starts to give them air to breathe, starts to crack open the acorn, if you will, and give them a place to start to find their way forward. So don't be stingy. Don't keep your ideas internally. Don't listen to those voices that say, I can't, or that's ridiculous. That's really not for you to determine. That's for the universe to determine based on where you put your intention and the attention you put on that intention, and then the actions you start to take to fertilize those intentions. So look around today at your environment, both in your space at home and outside, and perceive the vast fecundity of the universe and the earth. Mother Earth is always creating and developing vital aspects of life every single day. And whenever you feel depleted or dried up, see if you can recharge yourself with the realization that life is eternally fertile and that you have access to that as well. Someone, the same person here, is thanking me for the book and reading it every morning, but it feels that the webinars are more informative. Well, of course, anytime we have a conversation in real time with somebody, even if it's through Zoom, but our human connectedness is crucial for bringing things to life. Words on a page are words on a page. And we've all had that experience where we read a great novel and then we see the movie and it wasn't what was in our head, but it was in the head of the writer maybe, or the director or the actors. So being in close contact with each other, getting out of isolation, being in conversation is another way to excavate our fertility, because we can't do any of it alone. It's really essential that we be in community. And so I would encourage you to find a community also where you can read to people what your fertile ideas are, what your creative ideas are, where you're stuck, where you're afraid, so that you can give space to all of that so it can breathe, so it can start to transmute also. So on that note, if we don't have any other questions, I want to encourage you to take advantage of this month of March. It's a beautiful month. Daylight savings time is next weekend. The days are going to be longer. The winter is starting to recede and spring is starting to pop forward. And so this is a beautiful time to revisit your intentions for the new year and to set forth a path for yourself of being wildly creative and fertile, and to also engage a community of concern, whether you put together, a small group of friends so that you're accountable to each other to help each other's garden grow, if you will. Someone's asking about patience when you feel like you've waited forever and the sign of your desire coming to fruition. Well, I think that is a mindfulness practice, this matter of patience, because we can kill something before it's had a chance to bloom. And there's also that very thin razor's edge when it comes to giving up versus being in reality. That's a very tricky place to land. How do I know that it's time to foreclose on this idea versus I'm giving up on myself? And sometimes that requires professional help, or at least a really good friend that you can talk things out with. In this case, you're asking about love and a baby about it may be getting too late. Well, that is always a challenging inflection point for people. And women especially go many routes. I think men can go similar routes, but men typically have an easier go of it. But for females, some women freeze their eggs in hopes of finding a partner where they can have a baby together if it's the right person. Some women go about having a baby on their own, which I think is doable, but also is an incredibly difficult path unless you've got a big support system, meaning you've got a big family and you've got a lot of people that are going to help you, not just say you're going to help you, but are really going to help you. And then the other is to ask yourself how wedded you are to that idea and why it means so much to you. And who would you be if you didn't have a child? And who would you be if you had a child? For many people, having a child gives them meaning and purpose in life. If you have a child, there's no doubt about why you have to get up every morning. There's something there that anchors you into getting up in the morning. And if you don't, you have to find other ways of making meaning and creating purpose in life. So these are all essential questions and really deep questions to ask yourself, and to ask yourself with someone else who's good counsel for you, because we shouldn't be trying to answer these deep questions alone. That's not how human beings work. We have these existential questions, and we really need reflection from fair witnesses or trusted others to reflect back to us and to ask us difficult questions so that we can come to these answers in an informed way and not in a closed or uninformed way. So patience, they say, is a virtue. And boy, that's always been one of my biggest issues, is to sit still and be present and be in gratitude for this day, because I don't know that I'm going to have a tomorrow. And this idea that I have to hurry up because time is closing in, or I'm getting older, or I have to do it now, or why isn't it happening now? Those are all things that pull us right out of the present moment. And they don't allow for things to emerge that we wouldn't have seen if we hadn't just gotten quiet and gotten patient. Someone writes, I'm 40 and also getting impatient and panicking. I'm thinking of having a baby on my own, but have been told it's hard work. I have a medium-sized support network. I wonder, do you think it's harder work than overcoming addiction? I have no way of answering that because I've never had a baby and I've never had to overcome addiction. So I can't personally give you an answer to that. I think those are two very different things. I'm sure, though, that having a baby triggers all of our issues. I'm not just sure, I know it's in the infant mental health literature that when women have babies, when they give birth, their primary attachment styles come to the foreground. All of their internal regulatory systems sort of downshift into a regressive place initially. That's why some women have postpartum depression. But eventually those systems come back online, but it's not an easy go, and it won't be easy at 40. That much I can tell you, just because of what happens biologically. But this is a question that you're going to have to grapple with, and a decision you have to make. And once you make it, there's no going back. There's absolutely no going back with that decision. So you're going to have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly, depending on the decision that you make. But once you make it, you have to live with it. And that's what's most important. It's sort of like if, you're in a relationship and you don't particularly like your in-laws, and your partner asks you to go to your in-laws for Thanksgiving, and you don't really want to go, but you say yes. Once you say yes, you have to not only go, but you have to go wholeheartedly. You can't go and pout or be unpleasant or rude. You shouldn't have gone if that's what you're going to do. So likewise, if you decide to have a baby, you can't be changing your mind once the baby is arrived. And you can't take it out on the baby either. You have to show up from the best in you. And that will challenge you to grow and change in ways that you never imagined, but it will certainly change you. So I hope you talk to somebody about this professionally, and you really spend some time, I don't know what it is, even if it's just a couple of months, so that you're making that decision with your eyes wide open and not in some, dare I say, love-addicted fantasy about, how great it will be, because children are beautiful and they enrich our lives in many, many ways. But that doesn't come without a price, because that's just not how life works. Life is messy and demanding and challenging. So thank you for that question, and good luck with your decision. It's not an easy decision to make. Right, so it doesn't appear we have other questions. So at this point, I want to wish you a happy spring. I want you to go out and multiply your consciousness and see what comes back to you. Make this an experiment for the month of March of how fertile can you actually be? How much can you start to realize your own internal, eternal potential, and see what the spring brings you. And until then, I look forward to seeing you in April.